hate introductions, don't you? But it seems like they're always necessary. So here goes. I'm Ashley. I'm a wife, mom, pastor, and missionary's kid, which is double trouble if you didn't know. And if you're in this space, we're here to learn about who God is, who we are in Him, and how to do faith in the real, meaning the real messy. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5. This episode today is all about belonging. I wonder how many of you out there can relate to the feeling of wanting to belong, whether it's wanting to belong to a place or wanting to belong with a group of people, but feeling like you just don't quite fit in. And that feeling of almost, if I try to describe it, for me, it's almost like floating, where you kind of float over here and it doesn't quite fit, so you move over there, and yet wanting to be anchored somewhere. And if you can relate to what I'm talking about, this episode is completely for you. And let's have a little talk about it. If you've listened to previous episodes, you know that some of my story involves wanting to belong. As a missionary's kid, we left the United States, we moved overseas, and I had looked forward to coming back home, the home being the United States. And then we arrived back home, and I figured out very quickly that I no longer belonged. I just didn't fit in. I was having a hard time relating with my peers. I didn't get the jokes. I was really behind on the movies and the music that they were all talking about. And I've moved several times in my life. And one consistent thing that happens is you move to a new place and a new location, and you enter into a group of people, many of which have either grown up in the area and or have grown up with other people in the group. And so they share a history. They share a history of location, they share a history of stories and jokes and memories. And you don't fit in with that. That can be hard. At least it's been hard for me. I've been thinking a lot about, even as an adult, how hard it can feel when you don't fit in, so to speak. I guess that I thought as a kid that someday I would grow up and kind of arrive, that it would be easier to belong, it would be easier to fit in, and that's just simply not true. If you're listening to this and you think that, I hate to burst your bubble, but there's hope in this, so don't worry, don't go anywhere. But that's just not true. Adults struggle with a lot of the same things that younger people do, and I think it's important that we talk about that and that we can relate with that, and hopefully have some wisdom to share with each other on these topics. I love The Wizard of Oz. I love old movies. You need to know this about me. I grew up watching the musicals and the classics. If this gives you any indication, my first crush was Gordon McRae in Oklahoma, the cowboy, the curly hair. I just knew I was going to marry a cowboy because I wanted to marry him. I thought, Cary Grant was just, fine stuff. I was not up to date with the movies from my era at all. And so I'm very familiar with those movies. They feel like home to me in many ways. And one of the classic lines that we all know comes from The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy clips her little heels together and she says, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home." And she had just spent the entire movie trying to get home. I think one reason I like that story is because I relate to Dorothy. I feel like so much of my life has been spent trying to get home, but where is home? And that longing for, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. When Eric and I got married, we lived in Illinois, and we lived in the area that he had grown up in and his family has lived in for many generations now. I was so excited to marry into a family like that because my family was very different, and we didn't have a lot of that history that his family had. He had, pretty much grown up in the same house, had the same friends, watched his peers grow up with him. And that was such a foreign concept to me, and one that I had dreamed about and thought about a lot. It was that idea of if I could just stay in one place and put down roots and really establish myself in this place, it would be wonderful. So when I married him, I thought, this is it. This dream is finally coming true. We're going to plant roots here, and this is where we're going to stay. And God had different plans. And it's funny. His part of the story is really interesting too, because he worked at a steel mill in Illinois, and I remember he he talked about, this is where I'm from, and this is where I live, and this is where I'm going to stay till I die. Period. Well, then we got news that his place of work was going to be closing its doors. And in that area that we lived in, there weren't a lot of options for someone in a career. And so it became very apparent very quickly that we needed to start praying and looking for other places to go so that we would have our needs met. And it was almost as if we reverted roles. I remember the day he came home and he said, I found a job in Hawaii. What do you think? And I was like, are you kidding me? Hawaii? No, that's way too far. You can take me for vacation. I'll go with you to a job interview, but I am not moving there. And he was ready to go. It was such a bizarre switch for us. And I think for me, it was just that I want to stay in this place that has become home. We lived there, I think it was 9 years as a married couple. We lived in that area, and we had 3 children while we were there. And I wanted the kids to experience growing up in one place with their friends and just the what I dreamed of as ideal home. I don't know. It's so funny because we have to be so careful how we pray. I think God loves to show his sense of humor when he answers our prayers sometimes. My sister and brother-in-law were living in Pensacola, Florida at the time. My brother-in-law is in the Navy, and we had been down there to visit a few times. And so I resigned myself to, okay, if we have to move, Lord, let's negotiate, okay? Let's move south. I would love to live closer to my sister. If we have to move, I want to be close to family because we were leaving family. Both my parents and Eric's parents lived in the area that we did in Illinois. So let's make this negotiation, God, and then it will be okay. Let's just south. Let's go south. And it's funny, I'm actually wearing one of my Oklahoma shirts today. I do love the South. Eric called me one day from work and he said, Michigan is on the table. And inwardly I went, oh, shoot. Because I kind of knew, I don't know how I knew, but in that moment, it was just like, I have been praying wrong. Of course, we're going to the opposite direction. And I had never been to Michigan, and I just imagined it as some sort of barren Arctic tundra. And keep in mind, I had lived in South America and grown up in the southern part of the United States. I was like, I don't do cold. What is happening here? But okay, we prayed about it. We came to the area to visit, and it was so strange because the first time that we came up here as a family just to see the area, I will never forget this. We were on the interstate in the car and we went up this hilly area. And as we reached the top of the peak, which those of you from mountain states are going to laugh because you're thinking those are not mountains, but just bear with me here. We got to the top of this incline and we looked out at all the trees and the beauty. It was fall, and it was this very bizarre sense of home that I couldn't explain. And Eric and I both knew by the time we left that weekend that this was where God was leading us. It was just a very solid sense of peace, and we were very much in agreement that this was where God was leading. So once again, home is different, and we came here where we knew no one. We did not have any friends. We didn't have a church home. It was just a very unsettling time. We had lived apart for a while. Eric moved up here about 2 months before we did because he needed to start his job, and we were trying to sell our home in Illinois. I had preschoolers and a 3-year-old that was being very resistant to potty training. We had a puppy that I was trying to house train. It was chaos. And we both had to make some very big decisions while we were living in different places. And so coming here was exciting because we were going to be together again. And then we came here and there was a lot of adjustment to be made even between us as a couple. So it was a difficult year. The first time we visited the church that we now call home, it was really, again, a really neat experience. We had decided beforehand that we were going to visit at least 5 churches. We had made a list. We want to make sure we visit other churches and have options. But we went to this church and I stood in that body of believers and worshiped and listened to the message that the pastor gave. And I remember thinking, this is the first time since we've moved that I felt truly at home. Because at that time, even our house didn't feel like ours. It was just it's a weird transition to make. And I was so thankful that God led us to that church very quickly, very early on in our transition here. But it takes time. It takes time to build relationships. It takes time to find, quote, your people. And in that time, I was reminded again and again and again of just that sense of longing for home. What I've discovered since then is that longing never really goes away. We love Michigan. We love our home. We love our church. We have developed some incredibly special friendships with people here. But there is still this longing for home. And I always attributed that to, well, we moved. Well, I didn't grow up here. All these reasons for that feeling. What I've discovered since is that many of us have that feeling of more. There's something more. This isn't quite home. And I believe that is because this world isn't our home. We were created for more. I found a quote from C.S. Lewis that I'll have to read to you. It says, "The fact that our heart yearns for something earth can't supply is proof that heaven must be our home." There are 2 things that we can do with this internal longing for home. We can become kind of resentful of it and try to fill that void with other things or people, or we can embrace that yearning for more and recognize that we have something to anticipate. There's something to look forward to. It's not an anticipation of I'm running from what's here and from the hardships that might be here. It's just the recognition that I'm a traveler passing through. God will give many blessings with our home here, and there will be many good things to experience, but home is heaven. Home is eternity with Him. And when we can learn to embrace that truth, when we can learn to be okay with the longing that we feel, we're better off. I think we can develop a mentality of missional living because we recognize, hey, this time here in this place is a season. I might live in Michigan until my last breath here on earth is taken, or God might move us around a little bit while we're here. I don't know. What I do know is that wherever He plants us on this earth is a purposeful plant. There's a saying I like, I see it all the time, bloom where you're planted. And I like that saying. We should bloom where we're planted. But part of blooming where we're planted is recognizing our purpose in where we're planted. And if you are a Christ follower, our purpose is to live out faith that points others to Christ and to share the hope that's within us. That's the good news with those around us. And that is embracing where you are. If you are struggling, though, with blooming where you're planted, if you feel like, I know that heaven is my eternal home, but I would really like to enjoy the home that I'm living in right now and I'm not, Maybe you feel lonely. Maybe you feel like you haven't found your tribe. That's a really popular, saying right now, find your tribe. Maybe you're struggling to just fit in. I resonate with that, and I feel for you in that because that's a hard thing. I'm going to say something that my parents often said to me because I was a very resistant friend maker because I didn't like goodbyes. The best way to have a friend is to be a friend. As far as it depends on you, live peaceably with everyone. Now, you cannot force people to be your friend. You cannot force people to be your BFF, but what you can do is you can go to God in your loneliness and in your hurt, and you can say, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm dealing with. And you can go before him and pray, that he will supply and fulfill those needs in you, because he will. But he did create us for relationship, not just with him, but with others. And I would encourage you to pray specifically that God would lead you to that person or those people that you can be friends with and really develop deep relationships with. But that development of friendship is not dependent on the other person solely, it's dependent on you. I'm going to go into this on a later episode this summer, but I know what it is to feel rejection and betrayal of close friends that you trust. Absolutely know what that hurt is. And it is very damaging, but it's not an excuse to become an exception to how God created you. You've got to reach out. You've got to try again. And you have to be willing to be vulnerable and recognize that even if you get hurt in the process, there's value there because you can learn from it and you can grow from it. So I would encourage you not to be fearful. But it's been amazing how when I've taken my needs and when I've taken my loneliness to God, how he has brought the right people, some for a season, others that I believe will be for life, to encourage me and to walk through this life with me. But it does require me reaching out. It's something that I'm honestly not very good at times. I have some friends that are just, I just admire them so much because they are so intentional in their relationship. They are so intentional in reaching out. And I want to become more like that, but I know it's an area that I need to grow in because I'm not naturally extroverted. I do not recharge by being with groups of people. I recharge by solo time. But there is so much value in relationships. People say that it isn't necessarily a place that makes a home, it's the people that you share it with. And there's a lot of truth to that. And that is why I'm encouraging you to reach out, to build relationship. You're going to have to go outside your comfort zone. When we moved here, it was a year of living outside my comfort zone, and it was hard. I can remember so much anxiety and fear when I would force myself to go to different events that were being hosted by our church or that were being hosted by our Sunday school class, or by inviting people to our home, or by going to someone's home that we had been invited to. It was very, very nerve-wracking for me. And it's exhausting for me because I really have to put myself out there. But it was so worth it because that is how God brought us together with other people that have become our lifelines, that have become our support, and hopefully that we are also supporting as we walk with them in life. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. And if you are struggling right now, would you do me the honor of just sending me a quick note in the description? You can find my email address, or you can find my website, ashleyivester.com, and then you can find contact info. If you want to send me a line and just say, maybe put the subject line as belong, and just say, please pray. I don't need to know the details unless you want to share it, but God knows. But I would be honored to pray for you, to pray that God will show you his greatness, will show you his love, and that he will provide your needs. And in the meantime, that you will be perseverant. I'll be praying that God gives you courage to go outside the box, courage to move beyond hurt that you may have experienced. And most of all, I will be praying that all of us, myself included, can learn to live with eternity in mind, that it's okay to feel that longing of wanting home, because truly there is no place like home, because home is heaven and we haven't reached it yet, but we will someday, and I look forward to it. I'm going to wrap up here by reminding you that when we are willing to admit that we need him, that's when we start making our stories all about him. Thanks for listening to More of Mine. I'll talk to you next time.